Okay, so here's a quick demo on deploying metadata from one org to another using Ant. Now you can do the same thing using the Eclipse IDE or even change sets, but if you're doing repetitive deployments or something that takes a long time to deploy, you want to look at Ant because it's much faster and you can do things that are scripted and do them on a continuous basis. So if you have, you know, metadata you want to push from sandbox to production org on a weekly basis, you can write a script using Ant and do that on a repetitive basis. So the first thing you want to do is install Ant. So there is actually a metadata API you can go to, and it tells you how to install Ant. Prerequisites are basically Java, Ant, and then you can get a sample of the build script that you want to use and the jar file. And you need to put that jar file in your computer's class path so that's accessible by Ant. Once you do that, you can go down here and look at the information about the actual declarative file-based API calls. So you can scan through this part right here and it tells you some information about it. One thing you want to look at also is the sample package XML. Now that has information. You'll see that in the build file. Actually, I'm on the wrong one here. You want to look at this one right here. This has the metadata types. Now that's going to be important because if you start hand coding or generating your build files, you're going to use these component names in your files. So they're a little different than what you might expect. So Apex Visual Force page is called an Apex page, for instance, and you want to make sure you get those right in your files. So what we're going to do is we're going to download the metadata from one org, and I'm going to push it to another org, and we're going to do that all through Ant. So the first thing to look at is I have this Ant demo folder right here, and I have my build file and my properties file, and then I have a couple of folders here I'll talk about in a second here. So let me go ahead and open this up here. So here's the build properties file. That has your credentials for Salesforce. It has my username, my password, and I've changed it a little bit so you can't see that. And then it also specifies the server URL, and you can change these based on if you're going to a sandbox or production. So that has your connection properties in there. Then you have your build XML file. And this tells Ant what you're going to be doing with the script. So I've got three different targets I'm going to run here. I've got to retrieve, I've got to deploy, and I've got to remove. And we'll go through those independently. So the first thing we're going to do is we're going to run the retrieve. And what that's going to do is first create a folder called metadata retrieve metadata. It's going to grab all the metadata files that I want to bring down from my target, and it's going to put them in the retrieve metadata folder. And the actual deployment package is specified in this retrieve source package XML. So let's look at that real quick here. So all right. So what it's doing is saying that I'm gonna grab a custom field on my standard object account called my field. I'm gonna grab the entire custom object. I'm gonna grab all my Apex classes, and I'm gonna grab a single Visual Force page, and I'm going to download that and stick that into a folder called Retrieve Metadata. And it's going to go ahead and create that folder for me as we do this. Alright, so let's go look first at my orgs here. You can kind of see what I have in here. So this is my source org, and you can see this is the account object, and I've got a field called my field, and let's see, I've also got a custom object called my object, and then I have some Apex class. I've got just a controller and a test class for the controller, and then I have finally a Visual Force page. Alright, so that's my source org. Now if I look at my target org, which I'm not going to do this right away, but you can see that there's no objects in here right now, and then for my Apex classes, I only have a couple standard ones here. So what I'm going to do is we're going to show how you can push that metadata from my source org to my target org. So first let's go ahead and run the script, and we're going to grab all of my metadata from my source org. So I'm going to do ant retrieve, and that's going to again call this target right here ant retrieve. It's going to perform these functions for us. So okay, now you can watch the screen back here. You can see the files being created here. it goes creates my folder. Now it's grabbing all the data that I specify in the deployment package. It's going to download all that and stick all those files in my retrieve metadata directory. Okay, so now we've got the successful build message. Now if I look at that, you'll see here's my package. If I open this up real quick, you can see it looks the same as what I specified in the source. Got my classes, my pages, my field name for my custom or standard object, and my custom object there. And then if I look, you can see here's all the classes, and there's the object. There's the standard object right here. If I look at that, you can see that only specifies my field in there. It doesn't have the rest of the fields for that object. And then if I look at my custom object, you can see that it has everything about this. Okay. And then same thing with the pages. And there's the package. Okay. So now we've got that. So then how do we push this over to our other org? So what I have to do is I actually have to go in and change. I have to change on the build properties. I have to change my username and password to point to my other org. So I'm going to do that real quick. I'm going to pause this real quick. Okay, so now I have my username and password for my target org. You see that was test 3, now it's test 4. And here's my password, and kind of obfuscated that a little bit for us. Okay, so now let's go and see how we push this over to our target org. So alright, so here's a target called deploy. And all it's going to do is it's going to look at the deployment package in the retrieve metadata that I just downloaded and use that to push over to my target org. Now, if there are Apex classes, most time it's going to run your code. It's going to run the test message for your code. There's some exceptions, things to look at in the actual metadata API documentation of when it will and won't run your test. Most of the time when you have Apex classes, it's going to run your test for you. So we'll just take that into consideration. So, okay, so now I'm going to go ahead and push all this metadata over into my source or target org. So now we'll do ant deploy. It's going to grab my build file. And again, it's using the package that I downloaded from Salesforce, not the one that I actually created. So now if I go back over to my target org here, well, look, we should see a custom object of my object here. And then we look at the accounts field. We should see my field. And then if we look at Apex classes, there's my controller, my test controller. And finally, here's my Visualforce pages. So you can see how simple that is to actually push metadata from one org to another. Much easier than using change sets or Eclipse for that. So now I want to wipe this out. So how do I wipe this out? So now when you want to delete metadata, you have to actually have what they call a destructive changes. And let's see. I have a remove directory here, and that has my destructive changes I want to make in there. So you've got to actually essentially take your deployment package and rename it destructive changes. So that way it knows you're actually going to delete this. And you've got to specify what you want to delete. You can't use an asterisk for a wildcard here. You actually have to tell it that you want to delete all of these. For this case, these classes, the Visualforce page, my field, and my custom object. So I'm going to go ahead and run this one now here. So if we look over here at the build XML, we run the target remove. It's going to take everything from it's going to find the destructive changes in the remove directory, and it's going to actually execute that against my target org. So let's go ahead and do that. And then we'll run ant remove. Look at my build file. All right, so that's build successful. So now if I refresh this right here, you see my Visualforce page is gone. If I look at the Apex classes, you'll see they're gone too. Then if I look at my custom object, you'll see it's been deleted. And then finally, if you look at the fields for the accounts, you'll see that it's been deleted also. Here it is. So there you go. That's how simple it is to use Ant to deploy metadata.